Welcome to episode 193 of the XS Noize Podcast, which focuses on in-depth interviews with musicians, artists, and people involved in the music industry. I'm your host, Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Matt Peters from Manchester four-piece IST IST about their fourth studio album, Light a Bigger Fire. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Betty Boo about her new album, Rip Up the Rulebook. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe in your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. IST IST release their eagerly anticipated fourth album, Light a Bigger Fire, their strongest body of work to date. The band have forged a formidable reputation from intense live shows, a fierce Mancunian DIY work ethic, and an ever-growing back catalogue of successful studio and live releases. In this interview, Matt Peters talks about writing and recording the album, upcoming live shows, and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Matt Peters from IST IST. So hi Matt, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. IST IST will release your eagerly anticipated fourth album, Light a Bigger Fire, on Friday the 20th of September. But before we get into that, I'd like to go back to the start. Can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
So my dad is a big prog rock fan, and I think one of the first memories I have was Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. I think that's probably one of the most tame prog rock albums in my dad's collection, but I remember picking that out and putting it on this cheap record player that he had, and it was just the ambient kind of synths and intro on that, and the way it kind of builds over a long time, and I just remember turning that on and really, I don't know, I think being intrigued more than anything. I was quite a curious child, and I was always kind of left to my own devices listening away to stuff. So I just started sifting through all sorts of things. So it's probably, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but yeah, my dad's record collection definitely made me want to figure out what was going on, I think. Not just enjoying listening to it, but also like how does this kind of get made and how does this come into the world, you know?
There's a great documentary about the making of that album, actually.
I've probably seen it. There's a lot of other stuff like Yes and King Crimson. I know it doesn't really come across in the music. We're not a prog rock band, but I think that's where my kind of earliest foundations kind of started. But yeah, just fascinating, really.
How do you think being from Manchester, a city with such a rich musical history, has influenced its identity as a band?
I think it's very entrenched in us, really. I don't know if it's that conscious a lot of the time. I mean, we can talk about that straight away, the Joy Division comparisons, and there is that kind of musical link. But also I think from the way that we run things is incredibly independent, and I think that is inspiring to be in a city that has formed and is known for producing these very kind of unique and independent type of bands, and also the kind of management side and the factory record side of things is something that we're conscious of. It wasn't like a decision, right? You know, let's be a fiercely independent band. It was kind of, there was no other option. We weren't getting signed or whatever. We kind of had to learn to do a lot of things on our own, and then kind of later on you realize that there's those comparisons to be made. And similarly to the music, if we keep it there, like it's not until later that someone points out, oh, your singer sounds a bit like Ian Curtis, or like your bass is kind of played up high in a melodic way, a bit like Peter Hook, or your drums are very simple. And it's like, oh, actually, we didn't really intend that to happen, but it's just, we're from a similar area. We're inspired, I think, by similar ideas. And then that's what happens, you know. But I'm originally from the Wirral, which I know isn't that far away, but I moved up here in 2015. And I think for me, it was very inspiring to kind of come to such a big city. Well, I know you have like from the Wirral, you got like OMD and like the Coral, and there's a few like great bands, but it's not the same where you're walking around in Manchester and there's a landmark on every street corner and every street. And I think it pushes you to want to be part of that, I think, and to kind of become part of the story of the city, because it has got quite a rich, mythical story, especially in like the post-punk kind of new wave scene that we kind of sit around. Yeah, so I think it's inspiring. It can also be frustrating, I think, when you're younger, especially on our first album, Architecture. It was quite a post-punky, black and white Manchester, right? We get the kind of comparisons there, but I think that pushed us to reach for more influences and more sounds. And I think on this fourth one anyway, we've definitely, it's not as obvious the comparison to those types of things, because over the years we've learned to use other influences and other types of music,
IST IST will release your fourth album, Light a Bigger Fire, on Friday the 20th of September, which as we speak is this coming Friday. It's a fantastic album. It's definitely a progression from your previous three. Did you go into the recording with any preconceived ideas, how it should sound and the kind of songs you wanted to write about?
I think there was a definite intention to write something that was more highly produced, I suppose, is the most obvious thing that we felt on our first three albums. We thought the songs were getting stronger, but we were missing an element that was kind of not being drawn out of the songs. So the way we've done things in the past has always been we'd go in and perform the songs in the studio, usually track them live, and then maybe spend a day or two doing overdubs, and then that's it, mainly due to just budget and time constraints. On the first album, we only really had like 5 days to do the whole record. And then it just kind of kept going up. And even on Protagonists, we did in 10 days. Whereas on this one, we've spent, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 weeks in total over December. We spent 2 weeks doing pre-production, which was kind of reworking the demos. And I think that was what we really wanted, was just someone to come in and elevate the songs that we'd already written, which were already sounding a bit more, I guess there's some still like post-punky rocky stuff, but there was a few that were more dance orientated, or we knew that there was room to grow with them. Because I think from when we kind of first started writing for this record, we already knew that we were going to work with a producer, and Andy had already been meeting up with Joe Cross, who produced the record. He'd been meeting up with him as far back as February last year. So even before we'd released Protagonists, we were already kind of chatting to Joe and getting an idea of he'd be the guy to do the next one. And then obviously time goes on, and it wasn't until like October, November, we'd finished writing the songs and demoing the songs. And then, once we got in with Joe, we didn't really know exactly what to expect, because we'd never worked with a producer before. We didn't really understand what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden we got in there for pre-production in December, and, we just started picking apart the songs, deleting the drums, replacing the drums with some programming, chopping this verse here, adding a synth there, trying to convince Adam to change a lyric here. It's all this kind of stuff that we didn't think, I don't know, we kind of wanted someone to do that. But then when it came to it, we were a bit shocked, like, oh, this is what it is. Like, this is what a producer does. And we just never really experienced that. So that was the whole point, really, was to take these songs from being good, and we're still proud of the last 3 records, but I think in particular it was a song on the last album, a song called Mary in the Black and White Room, where I think that could have been a much grander song, and it was a bit more synth heavy. And I think we just knew that if we'd have gone in with a producer, and if that had been actually kind of mined into, it could have been absolutely massive. I mean, it is a great song, and we're still, people still love it. But I think that was the catalyst to then reach out to someone, and because we knew there was a level up to be taken,
What's the songwriting dynamic like in the band? Is it a collaborative effort, or does one person typically take the lead?
Adam typically, I mean, as I'm speaking now, the album's out on Friday, and he's probably already got maybe like 20, 30 songs in a Dropbox as demos. And it was since lockdown he really developed this technique and really got into the kind of demoing and starting songs himself. And then what typically happens is he'll send it to me and Andy, or even before that, he'll sit down with Joel, and actually Joel will tell him, I can't physically play that. That's a drum beat that's just too complicated or whatever, and kind of gives him that input. But he'll send it to me or Andy. We'll put our parts on it, have a play with it, try and come up with a better bass line or a better guitar part or synth part or whatever it is. So it typically starts with Adam, which I think works quite well because it gives us a good kind of starting point and consistency for all the songs. On this record, actually, Andy demoed one of the songs, Dreams Aren't Enough. Andy came up with the kind of basic demo for that. But it gets more collaborative as the process goes on. But it typically starts with Adam with an initial kind of seed of an idea, and then it gets passed around. But I think that works quite well because obviously he's the one singing, and that's the kind of emotional bedrock of the song. So if he starts with the chord progression and all that kind of stuff that he's worked around the lyrics, then we can just go in and amplify bits and add our kind of flavors to it. Yeah. But we then go and take those into the room once they're kind of sounding pretty decent and promising in a laptop. Then we'll kind of sit down and, as a band, start playing it in the room, because we are, I think primarily a live act as well. So I think we need to get together and actually hear them being performed as a band. So that usually kind of, you don't know whether a song's going to translate into the rehearsal room or onto the stage until you actually get together and play it. But yeah, it's quite a collaborative effort as it goes on, but it's a long process. Some of the songs on this new album, I think we wrote The Kiss, for example. I think we wrote that at the end of 2022, I believe. Mm-hmm. As like the very first song that we wrote for this record. So sometimes songs they take a long time, and they, go through all sorts of changes.
The sound on this album is huge. The songs are even bigger, and they seem more widescreen than before. And I read John Rubb's review of the album, and he says, it's an album of singles, and that's what it seems like.
It was a really hard one to pick, the singles. We were going round and round for ages. I think Lost My Shadow was an obvious choice for the first single because it's quite, it's probably the most true to form for us, and there's not too much of a surprise in there. But it's left out quite a lot of songs. Like the 4 singles that we picked are great, but as you know, because you've heard it, there's a lot of big songs on it that no one's heard yet. So yeah, that was just, we had a good selection of tunes going in, and we knew we wanted to write stuff that was quite concise, and that's what Joe helped with as well. He called it economizing. So if a part didn't need to be 4 bars long, he'd trim it down to 2, or, if it didn't need another chorus there, he'd just get rid of it, so he was quite brutal with that kind of side of it. So what that's ended up with is 10 very kind of, there's no fat, everything's been trimmed away, it's kind of, there's not much chance for a breather until the very end of the album, where things kind of slow down a bit, but even then it's still intense, And
when he was doing that, and when he was trimming down the tracks, was there times in the studio where like all looking at each other going, what's he doing here? Or we precious?
I think I was. I don't believe the other 3 were. I think for me, because I joined the band later on, I joined in 2018 as the kind of the person to do the synthesizers and the extra guitar parts. So I think over the years, because we've not really worked with a producer, I almost saw myself as the guy who adds that extra synth line or adds the little hook here and there, because that's what I was brought in to do. That's my job. So I think, and I'd recorded the demos, so I was kind of in charge of mixing and getting all the demos together. So obviously I'd spent a long time working on the demos and adding all my extra parts. So I think I struggled a little bit. And there was times where like Adam would add like a synth part or or Joe would add a synth part, and I was like, oh, but that's my thing, that's what I'm supposed to do. But then I think I realized I was actually reading Will Sargent from the Bunnymen. I was reading his the second autobiography that he did back in January, and he talks about that exact problem with demoitis, where you've listened to the demo so much and you've gotten so attached to the way that sounded and the exact thing, the magic that was there, that you kind of can't get past it when you get to record the full album. And I just realized then, I was like, that's exactly right. And then when I went in and listened to what had changed and all these extra parts that had been added, I was like, it makes the song better. That's all that matters. And then after that, it was quite freeing because there wasn't as much pressure on each of us to be the one that kind of not fixes the song, but makes the song better. That's what we've hired Joe to do, is to make those difficult decisions. If your guitar part isn't working there, then you need someone to be like, we're going to change it, and you got to deal with it. And then what's ended up happening is we've had to relearn the album a couple of times and trying to remember, like, what's he played there? Like, what's been changed there, and go back and relearn it. Especially Joel, because Joel learned it in the demo stage and then he didn't really play it for ages because we were working with programmed drums, and then he had to relearn it for the studio. In January, we went to a studio and recorded the drums, bass. He played it there, but then Joe would even, after that, he'd go and edit, or he'd use, he'd give Joe a free Joel would do a free pass, which was basically just at the end of the take, right, do one more and play whatever you want. So Joel would be playing these ridiculous drum fills and just like overplaying like crazy. And then, Joe would be like, that's great. And then 4 weeks later, when we get back to Joe's studio and Joe's kind of chopped it up or taken a fill from that free pass and put it into the main take, and then Joel had to come back in and listen and be like, I don't remember playing that, but I clearly played it, but that was a whole new thing. And then so Joel's had to relearn this album probably like 3 or 4 times, bless him. But we're about to go on tour and he's got it nailed now. So
my favorite track on the album is Hope to Love Again. What track stands out for you?
Oh, that's a tough question. I know it's a cop out, but I love all of them, really. And that's kind of, it shows when my favorite kind of changes all the time. I mean, even today we were playing through the whole album. It's just every song after the next has a different challenge or a different part that's really satisfying to play. I do love Hope to Love Again because it is different for us, and playing it is kind of challenging because it's out of our comfort zone. Even though it's incredibly simple, there's a lot of complexity within the simpleness of it. So if I had to choose, I'd probably say Can't Wait for You, because that one has probably been the hardest one to get right over the course of recording the album. It's changed a lot. So the way that it's ended up now is it's satisfying to have done the work over the last year and a half or whatever, and to hear it as it is now is kind of the finished version. But as we go and tour it, it'll have that room to change and improve over time as well. I love Ghost as well, the last one on the album.
Yeah, it's a great way to finish the album.
Yeah, and it's the first time that I've been able to actually play piano as well, because on the last few albums there's been actually a few songs that have called for a piano, but we've just not had the budget or the time to actually go and record a proper piano. But on this one they had a grand piano at the studio, and we spent a day tracking piano, and it's great to actually, it feels like a mature song, and that was one that Adam had kind of come up with, and then I kind of finessed it with my piano playing, and it's that's going to be a really good one to play live as well. And it shows another side to us again, and it's just that constant evolution, bringing in new elements and trying to surprise people a little bit, and surprise ourselves, I suppose, with what we can, I suppose, get away with.
Well, overall, are you pleased how it turned out? Bringing a producer for the first time, was it an enjoyable experience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was a much more like drawn out process. So I think we'd gotten used to how immediate the old way of doing things was, but this time you could kind of hear the results as it was happening. You could hear the songs really taking on a new life, really, and just sitting down and spending a day just doing one song, just one keyboard part on one song, that was completely alien to us. And that leaves you time to question things a lot more, which can be frustrating, especially when there's 3 or 4 of you in the room and sometimes people have different opinions, but that's what's made this album sound the way it sounds, and we'll do it again the same way, I'd imagine, because you can hear just the songs wouldn't sound the way they are without all that. What's interesting is on the special edition 2 LP of the album, we're doing the main album on the first disc, and on the second disc it's the demos. So you can really, this is the first, we've done that before on the last few albums, but they never really sounded that different. The song, the structures were the same, all that kind of stuff. Whereas this one, you'll hear a complete different album basically, which is really interesting. And I've gone back and listened to the demos again, and I'm like, oh wow, like why were we doing it like that?
So are you going on tour then? You mentioned some live shows. When do they start?
Yeah, so this week we've got some outstores. So the album's out on Friday. We're doing the Jacaranda in Liverpool on Friday. And then the Bury, Met in Bury on Sunday. And then on the Tuesday, we're doing the Fighting Cocks in Kensington. So they're all in association with record stores. The proper tour starts on the 2nd of October. So we're doing the UK tour starting the 2nd of October, ending with New Century in Manchester on the 19th. And then I think 2 weeks after, we're doing Europe. So we're out in Europe for the whole of November, which will be great because we're doing some really big shows over there, like the Paradiso in Amsterdam, which has been on our bucket list for a long time. So yeah, really looking forward to going out there. I'm playing some new places as well, like going down to Zurich and Vienna, Prague, Budapest, Poland. So there's a lot. Those are all places we've never played before. So yeah, it's exciting to go a bit further south and further east.
Well, you're a big fan of putting out live albums. You've put out quite a lot. You must feel pretty comfortable as a live band on stage.
Absolutely. I mean, like the studio version of the band only really exists for the time that you're recording the album. The rest of the time we're rehearsing and we're existing in the live world. So I think since we've been properly touring since like 2022, every year we've kind of stepped up a little bit and we've gotten tighter, and maybe the drum solos have gotten a bit wilder, or the guitar solos have got a bit louder, or the intros have got longer. So I think we've definitely enjoyed just, I don't know, owning that part of the band, and I think our fans love it as well. I think that's that's what they come to see, and they're always incredibly enthusiastic at the shows. And we've got to put that out as a live record, as often as we can, really. And it's kind of what the band was built on. We were always doing like Bandcamp versions of live recordings and stuff like that, or even fan recorded, field recorders, bootlegs. We'd always kind of do that sort of stuff. So it's that's all our way of keeping the early spirit alive. But this time we've had to level up again because the studio recordings have gone up in production value, so must the live show. So we've got a few more bits of gear, and Joel's got a nice shiny brand new drum kit, and we're sponsored by Laney amplifiers as well, which that's been a great help, and that's really improved things as well. So I think it's something that we take a lot of pride in, and we want the show to sound as good as it possibly can because it means so much to us, and it's so fun for us to go and do. Especially now that, because we're all full-time as well, since, January really, we've all been doing this as a full-time job, which when you're not gigging feels very much like a normal job, where we're in spreadsheets a lot and running the campaign ourselves and doing all that kind of stuff, which, let's be honest, isn't the most fun part of being in a band, but it's very necessary. So now that we're approaching tour time, it very much feels like the easy bit, really, and the bit where we get to go out and make some noise and have fun and connect with the fans as well, where we've kind of been separate from them for months. So yeah, it'd be great to get out there with a new set of songs as well. It's always exciting.
Well, the band have released 3 studio albums prior to Light a Bigger Fire, and I'm going to mention each one. And can you tell me briefly what comes first into your mind when I mention each one? So we'll start off with the first album, Architecture.
COVID, because we released it in May 2020, and that was kind of scary because we didn't, we it was our first album. We didn't really know how exactly it was going to go down, but it ended up doing us a favor in a way because I don't know, we kind of, for a lot of people, it was something that they look forward to in that horrible time. So it just reminds me of when I shaved my head and taking a picture with the album cover and not being able to see the band on, when we'd release the album or even go out and do a show. That was the furthest thing from any of our minds. So, but it was my first album with the band, and writing it was a special time as well. It was our first experience kind of doing a full length album and pacing it and getting all those elements right. So yeah, and getting out and actually being able to play it eventually was really, really great as well.
And then you released The Art of Lying in 2021.
I'd say my first thought is guitar solos, because we actually, I should have said COVID again, because we wrote that during lockdown and stuff. But during lockdown, I was practicing a lot more guitar because I wasn't actually a very good guitarist when we did architecture. And I thought that I had lots of time on my hands, so I practiced a lot more and got a Led Zeppelin songbook and bought my Les Paul off Adam, and the guitar playing got a lot better. And then on Art of Lying, I think we had the opportunity to kind of experiment, and it got a little bit more involved in terms of like guitar arrangements and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say guitar solos.
Protagonist?
Sheep, because we recorded that one in Chorley in an old converted cow shed, which was next to, it was on a farm, and there was just loads of sheep knocking about, and it was right, it was really in the middle of nowhere, which again feels like a cliche, like, Led Zeppelin 3 or whatever, in the middle of nowhere. But it wasn't an acoustic folk album or whatever. It was very much a rock album. And also I think the making of us as a band, really, because that album I think really helped elevate us up quite a few levels. And we'd been getting into the swing of things with touring as well by 2022. So by the time it came out in 23, we were ready we did the Ritz in Manchester and went over to Europe and did a lot bigger shows. But yeah, Sheep, there's a lot of Sheep, much to thank for that album, I think.
If people want to understand the music of this list, what are the 5 songs they should listen to?
Oh, wow. I mean, you'll get 4 different responses from the 4 different band members, but I think You're Mine is obviously a great place to start. That is a great introduction to the band, and I think it's many people's first song that they hear. Then I'd say Knight's Arm, which was the first song that the band ever wrote way back in 2015 when the 3 of them started, way before I joined. But we still play Knight's Arm occasionally, and it's still got a lot of life in it and gives a good sense of that kind of slightly slower, moodier, quiet then loud kind of Pixies style that we love. God. Then I'd say Stamp You Out, because it's probably one of our heaviest songs, and that's again how the band started. When they were a 3-piece, they were a lot heavier, and when we were writing Protagonists, I came up with the riff for Stamp You Out because I'd missed all that kind of early days punk rock stuff, and I kind of missed it. So I wanted to write something that was a little bit heavier and a little bit, I guess, punkier. So Stamp You Out gives a really good idea of that. And then I'll pick something off the new album. Let's say Can't Wait For You, because it's, one of my favorites off the new album. And it's a little bit poppier. It's got a lot more catchy parts in it and kind of shows a bit more of a new direction for us. And then I would pick Triple X off the new album, because on every album we tend to have 1 or 2 more electronic numbers, and that's where it's kind of me and Adam, that's where our influence comes in a lot, because me and him love like ambient music and electronic music. And although it's not the most popular part of the band, on each album we do have 1 or 2 softer electronic tracks. And I do actually think that's quite a big part of the band. Even on the rockier stuff, like we're kind of all those textures and ambient parts are something that me and Adam spend a lot of time on and are really interested in. So I think those 5 give a really good kind of cover of the whole sound, really. I'm quite pleased with my 5 choices, actually. I'd not thought about that before, but yeah.
What's the ultimate goal for IST IST as a band? You know, how do you see your music evolving in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, the ultimate goal, I think, if I answer that one first, the ultimate goal really is, it's not the most poetic thing, but we just want to earn a living doing music. And really I think that's the first thing, especially this year, with it being the first year of us being full time. It's being able to do this and nothing else really is a blessing. And that's for all of us, I think, ever since we were young, I think that was what we all really naturally were drawn to doing. And we've all had jobs and we've all worked for a long time, but we always knew our hearts weren't really in it. So yeah, being able to sustain this as a business really is a big goal.
Is it hard?
It's getting easier.
Mm.
You know, it's been tricky this year because it's an unknown, really. I mean, like I must give credit to Adam, because he is the finance man, and he's really got a great business mind on him. Andy runs the record label side of it for us, and he's got another great business head on him as well. So I've got to really put it down to the two of them, really, who've been working at this full time actually for a bit longer than me and Joel, but they've kind of built it to the business that it is today, and me and Joel are starting to fit into that as well now. But yeah, I mean, we've got to remind ourselves that we are a creative bunch, and I think as time goes on, I think we'll be able to afford to focus more just on the music, because we still have time to do that and still write and just play and enjoy being a band rather than a business. But I think at the minute, because we do so much of it ourselves, you're just towing the line between the two, where you do too much of the business and you lose the joy of it, and then you just want to play. And then we get together as the 4 of us, and then you realize that's why you're doing it, is to go and play and be creative and be on stage and get joy from it. So I think the ultimate goal in the next few years is to keep growing the band, keep writing great music, and I guess maybe, you know, bring it to more people, but be able to sustain it as well, yeah, and write bigger and better songs.
Just a couple more questions, Matt. I like to ask my guests the following questions. For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
I think the first one that comes to mind is the Yes album. And I've actually, it's quite funny because I've been listening to that a lot recently. But that was one of the first albums that I remember seeing the cover and opening it up and putting it down and listening to it and just being amazed by kind of the scope of music that was on there. So I think that's possibly my earliest memory. And like I was saying before about my dad's record collection, it was all the Pink Floyd albums as well, like the art and the music that seemed to match so well with the art. You know, it was great. And it's nice to be in a band that Andy does all the artwork and stuff. And I think it's a big part of why I'm proud to be in the band. It's because we do have a visual identity. There's the artworks are always great and very striking, and it's a lucky band to be in, really, because I get to essentially come in and sort of do whatever I want, guitar wise and keyboard wise and effects and textures. You know, that's kind of what I've always wanted, is to almost be more of a sort of producer and just kind of do what needs to be done to kind of help the song be a little bit better. So, and that I think all comes from those early rock and prog albums, I suppose. And it's prog. I think prog's cool again now, so I think it's okay to say that.
Yeah, I like a bit of prog myself.
Yeah.
What song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Brat by Charlie XCX.
Straight. You don't need to think about that.
Yeah. I know it's gonna sound like I'm just saying it because it's like the big thing at the minute, but I don't think I'm just joining the crowd, because I think it is actually great. And I think we all like a bit of pop and a bit of bit of stuff like that. You should listen. We've got I don't think we'll ever share this with anyone, but we've got a van playlist that's about 1,500 songs long. And honest to God, some of the stuff in there is shocking, really, because you'd never think. But we listen to all sorts of stuff, to be honest. And I don't think any of us are adverse to accepting that all sorts of influences come in unexpected ways. So maybe we should have put that in our press release, tried to get on the Brat bandwagon, but I don't think it would have gone across too well with our current fan base. But I've been listening to that a lot because it reminds me a lot of like really some of the kind of Aphex Twin and the electronic sounds in the background. Even if you listen to it instrumentally, I think the actual production is just fantastic, and there's some really good, like, tight sounding synths and drum machines and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say that's my guilty pleasure at the minute, but I don't even feel that guilty about it because I think it's great.
If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career so far, what would it be?
I'd probably say when the first time I ever played in Europe, which was in 2019, we flew to Porto and played Post Punk Strikes Back Festival. A great guy called George runs it over there at the Hard Club in Porto. And it was the first time I'd ever like flown and played a gig on European soil. And what makes it even weirder that I want to go and revisit it is because the night before we flew there, we'd played a gig at Ali Pali in London, supporting Embrace. And we finished the gig, drove back to Manchester, got dropped off at the airport at like 2 a.m, and then flew straight from there to Porto. And I don't think any of us slept on the plane. So by the time we got to Porto, we arrived just in time for sound check at midday. And I think we'd been awake for like 36 hours by the time we actually did the show. But it's still one of my favorite memories because Porto is such a beautiful place. The weather was great. And it was just delirious from, not sleeping. So it was kind of this kind of dreamlike state. And the gig was great. And because it was Porto and it's so hot, we played at like 11:30 or something like that. So it was a long couple of days, but just a great experience. And it's like those classic stories when, bands do a show in one country and then they fly the next day and they do it in another. And it was still early days for us. And it wasn't like we were going to play Lollapalooza or whatever, but it was my first kind of jump into that kind of world of touring, I suppose. And I think I was only 21 or something like that. So it was quite exciting. So even with the, no lack of sleep, I'd do it again.
So Matt, Light as a Bigger Fire is released on Friday the 20th of September. It's absolutely fantastic. Is there anything you would like to mention before we wrap up? Let the listeners know where they can get the album.
So you can buy the album directly from our website, ististmusic.com. It's also available in most great retailers, Piccadilly Records or Wax and Beans in Bury in particular. Have always been great supporters of us. If you want to come to one of the outstores, it's your chance to come and see us in a small venue playing the full album. And we're doing a signing session afterwards, so come on down. But yeah, other than that, come see us on tour and pick up your copy after Friday or before Friday, whatever. We're hoping to get a top 40 this time. We got 41 last time, lost out to Whitney Houston. So we've got to get into the top 40 this time. It doesn't really matter, but I think for an independent, unsigned band, it's quite an achievement. So any support is more than welcome. So
that would be amazing, and I don't see why it shouldn't because it's great. It's your best album so far, in my opinion.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, Matt, that's me done. I really enjoyed that. Hopefully, it'll be
Great.
good to see you sometime in Ireland, Belfast or Dublin.
Actually, yeah, that's we've got next year. Like we were talking about, like financially, we're doing better. We're not just paying our wages anymore. So next year's the one where I think we can afford to do some. I mean, it won't even cost us that much to get over Ireland. I can't believe we haven't been there already. But it's like this is the first year where we've not had jobs, so it's kind of been we've not done a lot of festivals, but that's more of an industry thing. But there's no reason why next year we're going to hopefully do Ireland. Whereabouts are you based?
Belfast.
In Belfast, okay, yeah. So maybe do like Dublin, Belfast, and we want to maybe do a bit of the States as well. It's just being able to afford to lose a bit of money, do a few things, maybe do Italy, Spain, go a bit further afield. So, but yeah, next year we'll definitely be doing another live album. I have to stop myself from saying it, but it's fairly obvious at this point. But we'll record it over the next couple of tours.
Nice one.
And then the next album will probably be, I think we're expecting it'll probably be like January 26 by the time we've finished writing it. But Adam's already got loads of tunes, and we've been trying to start some kind of before we go on tour, just so we've got something to work on when we get back. But we're pretty prolific. We don't really stop.
No, you don't. You definitely don't.
Now that we start touring a bit more, I think we might have to pick our moments a bit better. Because last year we did the Protagonists tour, and then we had basically the whole of summer and the whole of autumn to just write, really. So whereas this year, obviously, we're releasing the album, and then we're basically on tour until the end of November. So, but yeah, now we'll have to try and make our way over to Belfast next year, definitely. But yeah, thanks for doing this, Mark. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
No, it has, and I'm not just saying that. I really love the album. It's great. So
great. Thanks, mate. I'm really excited. I'm just obviously I'm not sick of it, but I just want to go out and play it. I just want to go and play it now. But it'll be glad to not just have it to ourselves. It'll be. I'm really looking forward for people to hear it, and I think the fans as well are gonna really love it. So